Grandma Rosa's house was sold for $400,000. The money is already in the account. I heard my father shout with joy on the phone as I entered his office with a coffee. The cup slipped from my hands and shattered on the marble floor, each shard seeming to tear my chest along with the devastating revelation. He had secretly sold our family inheritance, the only place that still connected me to the most important woman in my life. My grandmother Rosa, who raised me among fragrant rose gardens and secret recipes, who taught me that family is sacred, who made me promise to care for that house like an ancestral treasure. And now I discovered that my own father had turned it into money without even telling me, as if our history was just a disposable property on an investment spreadsheet. This cannot be happening, I thought, as the world spun around me and my mind refused to accept that the man who raised me had stabbed me in the back in the cruelest way possible. Roberto continued talking on the phone as if my presence there was irrelevant, discussing financial details of the sale with an astonishing naturalness that left me even more shocked and hurt. Yes, the money has been in my account since yesterday. 400,000 reais that will go straight to finance our honeymoon in Europe, he said with genuine joy in his voice, a happiness that cruelly contrasted with the searing pain that was spreading through my chest like poison. I discovered in that terrible moment that my father had sold our family's most precious property to fund a romantic trip with Camila, his 30-year-old girlfriend, an artificial blonde woman who was only 2 years older than me and who had entered his life less than a year ago, shortly after my mother's passing from cancer. The humiliation and anger I felt were so intense that I had to lean against the wall to avoid collapsing on the floor along with the shards of the broken cup. It was as if my father had sold not just a house, but all the sacred memories of my childhood, all the special moments I lived with Grandma Rosa in those rooms full of history and family love. How can he do this to me? How can he sell the only place that still connects me to Grandma and my mother? I thought anxiously, feeling hot tears forming in my eyes while watching my father continue his conversation as if nothing extraordinary was happening in that moment that would change our relationship forever. When Roberto finally hung up the phone after 5 more minutes of conversation about banking transfer details and legal documentation, he looked at me with an expression that mixed irritation and discomfort, as if I were an inconvenient intruder who had caught something that should remain secret. Isabella, are you okay? Why did you break the cup on the floor like that? He asked, feigning concern about my reaction instead of directly addressing the enormous elephant that now completely dominated the tense atmosphere of the room. My voice came out hoarse and trembling when I finally managed to form coherent words. Dad, I just heard you talking about selling Grandma Rosa's house. Is what I heard true? Did you really sell our family home without even consulting or telling me? He sighed deeply and leaned back in his black leather executive chair, adjusting his expensive tie with nervous gestures that demonstrated his clear attempt to avoid a direct confrontation about his questionable actions. Daughter, I was going to tell you about the sale eventually, but I didn't want to worry you with complicated financial details while you're focused on your work and personal life. He replied with a condescending tone that deeply irritated me, as if I were a child incapable of understanding important adult matters that directly affected my life and my family heritage. The anger that had started as a small ember in my chest was now transforming into an uncontrolled bonfire that threatened to consume all the patience and respect I still had for the man who raised me. Dad, that house wasn't just your personal property to sell as you pleased. It was the house where Grandma Rosa lived for 50 years, where my mother grew up, where I spent my entire childhood creating the most precious memories of my life. I shouted, my voice echoing through the walls of the elegant office with an intensity that surprised even myself. And you sold all of that to finance a honeymoon with a woman you barely know, a woman who's practically my age and who's obviously only interested in your money. Roberto rose abruptly from his chair, his face turning red with irritation at my emotional reaction, but also showing clear signs of poorly disguised guilt that confirmed my worst fears about his selfish motivations. Isabella, you're being dramatic and exaggerating. Camila makes me happy after 2 very difficult years since your mother left us, and I have the right to seek a new chance at happiness at my age. He responded defensively, but his words sounded empty and rehearsed, as if it were a speech he had mentally prepared to justify his questionable actions. And besides, that house was costing a lot of money in maintenance and taxes. It was an unproductive investment that needed to be liquidated anyway. That financial justification was the last straw that made my revolt completely overflow. Because I knew my father earned very well as a senior engineer at a multinational company and that the maintenance costs of the house had never been a real problem for our comfortable economic situation. Dad, don't come to me with this excuse about maintenance costs because we both know you have more than enough financial means to maintain that property. I fired back, walking toward his desk with firm steps that demonstrated my determination to confront him directly. The truth is that you sold the family house to impress your new girlfriend with an expensive trip through Europe, without caring at all about what it meant to me and our family history. I picked up one of the golden pens that were organized on the mahogany desk and held it firmly between my fingers, not as a threat, but as a physical anchor that helped me maintain emotional control in the face of the devastating situation. You know what hurts the most, Dad. It's not even the fact that you sold the house. It's the fact that you did it behind my back, like a lying teenager hiding something from his parents, showing that you don't consider me worthy of even participating in decisions that directly affect my life and my most sacred memories. Roberto tried to interrupt me several times, gesturing impatiently with his hands, but I didn't allow him to shift the focus of the conversation with his empty and selfish justifications. And worst of all, I continued relentlessly, is that you didn't even give me the opportunity to buy the house from you, to take on the maintenance costs, to preserve that sacred place where Grandma Rosa planted each rosebush in the garden with her own arthritic hands. My voice was becoming choked with emotion, but I fought to maintain firmness and not let tears compromise the strength of my arguments. I would have assumed all the costs, Dad. Would have made any financial sacrifice to keep that house in the family, to preserve the room where Grandma used to tell me stories before bedtime, the kitchen where she taught me all the recipes that today are the only tangible things I have left of her. Roberto finally managed to interrupt my outburst, slamming his open hand on the desk with a dry noise that echoed through the room. Enough, Isabella. You're being completely irrational and too sentimental. I am a 55-year-old adult man. I have the right to make my own financial decisions without needing to ask permission from my daughter. His defensive and aggressive reaction only confirmed that he knew exactly how wrong his choices had been, but that he was willing to attack instead of admitting his mistakes, as a mature adult should do. If you wanted that house so much, you should have expressed interest before, instead of just visiting sporadically and complaining that it was abandoned. That unfair accusation was like a slap to my dignity, because I visited Grandma Rosa's house at least twice a month, always keeping the garden tended, cleaning the rooms, checking if everything was in order, treating that place with the care and respect that my father clearly no longer felt. Dad, you know perfectly well that I took care of that house as if it were a sacred temple. I pruned the rose bushes, cleaned the windows, changed the burned-out light bulbs, paid for minor repairs out of my own pocket. I shouted, my indignation growing exponentially in the face of his cruel attempt to distort reality to rid himself of guilt. And if you had mentioned just once that you were thinking of selling, I would have pursued financing, would have sold my apartment, would have done anything necessary to keep our family heritage intact. I walked to the panoramic window of the office and looked at the city below, trying to find some emotional control in the familiar view of buildings and streets I had known since childhood. But you preferred to act like a cowardly traitor, selling our history in secret to fund the whims of a woman who probably won't even be by your side a few years from now, when the money runs out and she finds another younger, richer man to manipulate. Roberto remained silent for a few seconds, probably processing the harshness of my words, But when he finally responded, his voice was laden with poorly contained anger and defensive stubbornness that demonstrated his complete lack of genuine remorse. "Isabella, I will no longer tolerate you speaking about Camila in such a disrespectful and prejudiced manner," he declared, rising from his chair and walking toward me with firm steps meant to intimidate, but which only reinforced my perception that he had become a stranger completely different from the father I thought I knew. "Camila truly loves me, makes me feel young and happy again after years of caring for your sick mother, and our honeymoon in Europe will be a special moment I deserve after so much suffering." He stood before me with arms crossed, assuming a defensive posture that revealed his inflexible determination to defend his selfish choices, even knowing how much they were hurting his only daughter. "And as for the house, what's done is done. The money is already in my account, the documentation has been signed, and there's nothing more you can do to reverse the situation, so I suggest you accept reality and stop making unnecessary drama." Those words sounded like a final sentence, a declaration of war, making it clear that he had definitely chosen his new girlfriend over his own daughter and all the family traditions that should be sacred. The coldness in his voice made me realize that the man standing in front of me was no longer the loving father who raised me, but rather a selfish and manipulative stranger who was willing to destroy our relationship to protect his own financial and romantic interests. I looked fixedly into his blue eyes, trying to find some trace of the father who used to take me to visit Grandma Rosa every Sunday, who would become emotional when she told family stories, who solemnly promised on her deathbed that he would care for the house as a sacred heritage for future generations. But all I could see were the cold eyes of a man who had completely lost his moral compass in the name of a late and destructive passion. "Dad, if that's how you feel, then we have nothing more to talk about," I finally said, my voice coming out surprisingly calm and controlled despite the emotional storm devastating my interior. "But I want you to know that you didn't just sell a house today. You sold our relationship. You sold my respect for you. You sold the trust I placed in the man who raised me." I walked toward the office door with slow and dignified steps, stopping only to look one last time at the environment where I had just discovered the most painful betrayal of my life. "I hope your honeymoon is worth losing your daughter, Dad. I hope every romantic moment in Paris or Rome compensates for having destroyed a family that your own mother built with so much love and dedication over decades." His expression changed slightly when I mentioned Grandma Rosa, but he stubbornly remained silent, demonstrating that his stubbornness was stronger than any remorse he might be feeling deep in his heart. I left his office without looking back, walking through the corridors of the company where he worked with my head held high and shoulders firm, even though my inner world was completely collapsing like a house of cards in the wind. The employees who greeted me along the way, people who had known me since childhood and always treated me as Roberto's little daughter, seemed to notice that something serious had happened from my facial expression. But I only responded to their greetings with polite nods without stopping for explanations. When I finally reached the elevator and pressed the ground floor button, I felt the first hot tears running down my face, tears of pain, anger, and especially grief for the relationship that had just died in that executive room. During the 15-second descent, I observed my reflection in the mirrored doors of the elevator and saw a 32-year-old woman who seemed to have aged 10 years in a single morning. A betrayed daughter who needed to find strength to rebuild her life without the support of the father figure who had always been her safe harbor. How will I explain this to Sophia? How will I tell her that my own father stabbed me in the back this way? I asked myself mentally, already imagining my best friend's indignant reaction when she discovered the sordid details of this family betrayal. The elevator reached the ground floor with a soft ding, the doors opened to the busy company lobby, and I walked toward the exit knowing I was leaving behind not just a building, but an entire phase of my life where I still believed in my father's integrity and unconditional love. During the bus journey to my apartment, I stared out the foggy window as the city passed by quickly, each block taking me further from the epicenter of my pain and closer to the refuge where I could properly process everything I had discovered. My mind worked frantically, reviewing each word of the discussion, each facial expression of my father, each flimsy justification he had used to try to minimize the gravity of his actions. It was as if I were watching a movie about someone else's life, because it seemed impossible that this bizarre situation was really happening to me. 400,000 reais, I whispered softly to myself. 400,000 reais that he's going to spend on a pleasure trip while I mourn the loss of the most precious memories of my life. The amount itself wasn't even what bothered me most. It was the devastating symbolism of the gesture, the clear message that my family history and I were worth less than his romantic whims with a woman too young to understand the true meaning of traditions and family roots. When the bus stopped at the point near my building, I stood up with shaky legs and got off on the familiar sidewalk, observing the trees on the street where I had lived for 5 years and feeling as if everything around me had lost some of the brightness and security that had always brought me comfort. Now I need to decide what to do with all this anger, I thought determinedly, because I can't let this betrayal go unchallenged without at least trying to do something. As soon as I entered my cozy two-bedroom apartment, I threw my purse on the sofa and ran directly to the room where I kept my photo albums, memory books, and all the objects I had inherited from Grandma Rosa over the years. I needed to physically connect with these tangible memories to make sure they still existed, even if the house where they were created had been sold like any ordinary merchandise. I opened the wooden chest where I kept the most precious things, yellowed photographs showing young Grandma Rosa in the garden of the house, handwritten letters telling family stories, recipes for cakes and sweets noted in her elegant handwriting, small decorative objects she gave me as gifts on special birthdays. Each item was physical proof that that house was not just real estate property, but a sacred repository of family history that deserved to be preserved and protected for future generations. I sat on the floor of the room with all these treasures spread around me, delicately touching each photograph and rereading each letter as if they were sacred scriptures, trying to absorb all the strength and wisdom that Grandma Rosa had left as a legacy for me. "Grandma, I'm sorry I couldn't protect your house," I whispered to a photograph where she appeared smiling next to the rose bushes she planted with such care. "But I promise I'll find a way to make your son pay for having betrayed our family in such a cowardly and selfish way." It was in this moment of intense emotional connection with Grandma Rosa's memories that my mind began to work more rationally and strategically, developing a concrete plan to confront the situation instead of simply passively accepting my father's betrayal. I grabbed my phone and called Sophia, my best friend since college and the only person I completely trusted to advise me in difficult situations like this. Sophia was a lawyer specializing in family and succession law, an intelligent and determined woman who always supported me unconditionally, but who also had the courage to give me honest feedback when I was being irrational or exaggerated. When she answered with her cheerful and familiar voice, I completely broke down in tears, telling the whole story from the moment I overheard my father's phone conversation to the terrible argument we had in his office. "Sophia, you won't believe what my father did to me today," I sobbed on the phone. "He secretly sold Grandma Rosa's house to finance a honeymoon with that young girlfriend of his." I heard Sophia take a deep breath on the other end of the line, probably processing the gravity of the situation, before responding with a voice filled with genuine indignation. "Isabella, dear, take a deep breath and tell me all the details from the beginning. This is very serious and we need to analyze your legal options immediately." For the next 40 minutes, I reported every word of the conversation, every flimsy justification from my father, every painful moment of the discovery, while Sophia listened attentively, asking specific questions about legal aspects that could be relevant for a possible lawsuit. "Isabella, from what you're telling me, there are several problematic legal issues with this sale," said Sophia after listening to my detailed account, her voice taking on the professional tone she used when analyzing complex cases. "First, if the house was registered as a family property or if there was a will from your grandmother specifying that it should remain in the family, the sale can be legally challenged." She paused to consult some documents on her end before continuing. "Second, If you can prove that you have been maintaining and caring for the property regularly, this establishes a bond of possession and use that can also be used legally. I felt a spark of hope igniting in my chest for the first time since that terrible morning, because the possibility of having some legal recourse meant that perhaps I wasn't completely powerless in the face of my father's betrayal. Sophia, I have receipts for cleaning supplies, proof of small repairs I made, photographs I took while taking care of the garden. Does this serve as evidence of what you're talking about? I asked anxiously, already getting up to look for these documents at my work desk. Yes, it does. Very much so. I want you to gather all these receipts and come to my office today, because we need to act quickly before the new owners take effective possession of the property. The hope I felt was so intense that for a moment I completely forgot about the pain of betrayal, focusing only on the concrete possibility of reversing that unfair situation and recovering the family heritage that had been sold in such a cowardly and selfish way. I spent the rest of the afternoon meticulously organizing all the documents, photographs, and receipts that could serve as evidence of my emotional and practical bond with Grandma Rosa's house, creating a complete folder that clearly demonstrated how I had taken an active role in preserving that property over the years. I found receipts for paint to paint the iron gate, payment vouchers for a gardener I hired to trim the larger trees, invoices for materials to fix roof leaks, and dozens of dated photographs showing the before and after of small maintenance projects I carried out with my own hands. Each document was tangible proof that that house meant much more to me than just an inherited property. It was a labor of love that I had been quietly developing, preparing the property for eventually moving there when I had more established financial conditions. How could my father completely ignore all this care and dedication I've shown over the years? I questioned myself as I chronologically organized the evidence. Did he really think I didn't care enough about our family heritage? The discovery of so much concrete evidence of my involvement with the property gave me a renewed sense of legitimacy in my indignation, confirming that my revolt wasn't just exaggerated sentimentality, but rather a justified reaction to a real and documented injustice. When I finished organizing all the evidence, I called Sophia again, confirming that I would be at her office at 5 in the afternoon, bringing with me everything that could help in the legal assessment of the situation and in formulating an effective strategy to confront my father's betrayal. Sophia's office was in an elegant building downtown with modern decor that conveyed competence and professional seriousness, exactly the type of environment where I needed to be to transform my emotional pain into concrete legal action. When I arrived punctually at 5 in the afternoon, she was already waiting for me with several legal books open on the table and a determined expression that immediately gave me confidence that I was dealing with a truly competent professional. Isabella, before we analyze your documents, I need to ask some specific questions about the legal situation of the property, she said, taking a notepad and golden pen. Do you know if the house was registered only in your father's name, or if there was any clause in your grandmother's will about keeping the property in the family? I tried to remember the bureaucratic details I had vaguely heard during the inventory after Grandma Rosa's death, but I admitted I hadn't paid much attention to the legal aspects at the time because I completely trusted that my father would make the right decisions about the family assets. I was very young when Grandma died, and my father took care of all the documentation. I always thought he would do the best to preserve our inheritance, I confessed with a tone of bitterness that reflected how naive I felt for having blindly trusted him. Sophia made some notes before responding. Don't blame yourself for having trusted your father, Isabella. It was natural for you to expect him to act with family integrity. But now we need to find out exactly what the current legal situation is and what your options are to contest the sale. During the next hour, Sophia meticulously analyzed each document I had brought, asking detailed questions about dates, values, and circumstances of each proof of care I had shown toward the property. She photographed all receipts with her cell phone, scanned the most important images into the computer, and created a visual timeline that clearly showed how I had taken on increasing responsibilities for maintaining the house over the past 5 years. Isabella, you have a very strong case here to question the sale, especially if we can prove there was a tacit family agreement about preserving the property, she explained, showing me the timeline she had created on the computer. The fact that you have invested time, money, and personal work in maintenance establishes what we call qualified possession, which can be legally used to contest sales made without your knowledge. I felt my heart race with positive expectation for the first time since that terrible morning, because I was finally seeing a light at the end of the dark tunnel of paternal betrayal. But I need to be honest with you, Sophia continued seriously, even with a strong case. It will be a complex legal battle that could last months and cost a significant amount in attorney fees and court costs. She leaned back in her executive chair and looked me directly in the eyes. The question you need to answer is, are you willing to enter into a legal war against your own father to try to recover the family house? The question echoed in the silent room like a challenge that would define not only the future of the property, but also the fate of my family relationship forever. Sophia, if there is a real chance to reverse this sale and recover Grandma Rosa's house, I am willing to do whatever necessary, even if it means suing my own father and completely destroying our family relationship. I responded without hesitation, feeling an iron determination solidifying inside me like concrete hardening under pressure. That house represents everything that remains of my connection to Grandma Rosa and to our family roots. And I won't let it be turned into money to finance the romantic whims of a man who has completely lost his moral compass. Sophia smiled for the first time since I began reporting the situation, an expression of approval and admiration that made me feel I was finally making the right decision after hours of emotional confusion. Then let's go to war, Isabella. The first thing I need to do is get a copy of the original deed of the house and your grandmother's will to verify if there is any clause that prevents the sale or establishes specific hereditary rights, she said, already picking up the phone to make some professional calls. I will also need a power of attorney from you to legally represent you and begin the process of halting the sale before the new owners take definitive possession of the property. I signed all the necessary documents with slightly trembling hands, not from fear, but from pure adrenaline at the prospect of finally being able to concretely fight against the injustice that had been committed against me and against Grandma Rosa's sacred memory. How much time do we have before the sale becomes irreversible? I asked, while watching Sophia strategically organizing all the papers in a red folder that she labeled Isabella versus Roberto case, recovery of family heritage. Depending on how the documentation was processed, we have between 15 to 30 days to file an action for nullity of sale due to lack of consent and failure to communicate to direct interested parties. Sophia explained, quickly consulting some legal precedents on the computer. The fact that you have regularly taken care of the property and invested your own resources in its maintenance creates a right of first refusal that can invalidate the sale to third parties, especially if we can prove that your father acted in bad faith by hiding the negotiations. She printed some legal forms and began filling them out while speaking. We will also claim that there was a violation of the principle of the social function of property, since the house had historical family and cultural significance that should have been preserved. I felt a wave of gratitude and renewed hope seeing how Sophia was transforming my personal pain into a solid and well-founded legal strategy. But Isabella, I need you to understand that your father will probably hire a lawyer to defend himself, and this could become a very ugly and painful legal battle, she warned seriously. He may try to attack your character, question your motivations, and even claim that you are acting out of revenge or financial interest rather than genuine love for the property. The possibility of a dirty legal war frightened me momentarily, but the mental image of Grandma Rosa's house being inhabited by strangers gave me renewed strength to face any adversity. Sophia, my father has already attacked me in the worst possible way by secretly selling our inheritance. I have nothing more to lose by fighting for justice. The following days were an intense emotional roller coaster, alternating between moments of hope when Sophia called me with good news about legal progress, and episodes of deep anxiety when I imagined all the terrible things that could happen during the judicial process. We obtained a temporary injunction that suspended the transfer of possession of the house to the new buyers, giving us precious time to build our case more solidly and in detail. The first legal victory, even being temporary, filled me with a vindictive satisfaction that I had never experienced before. I was finally causing some kind of real consequence for my father's selfish and treacherous actions. During this period, I completely avoided any contact with Roberto, ignoring his incessant calls and increasingly desperate text messages where he alternated between attempts at emotional reconciliation and veiled threats about the legal consequences of my actions. Isabella, stop acting like a spoiled child and let's talk like adults about this situation, said one of the messages I received early Thursday morning, demonstrating that he remained completely unable to recognize the real gravity of his mistakes. My cousin Amanda, who has always been my confidant in delicate family matters, became an important source of emotional support during these difficult days, visiting me daily and helping me maintain my mental sanity in the face of the growing stress of the legal battle. Isabella, you're doing the right thing fighting for Aunt Rosa's house, she said one Saturday afternoon while we were having tea in my kitchen. Uncle Roberto completely lost his way after he got involved with that Camila, and someone needs to put him in his place before he completely destroys our family history. The second week of the process brought surprising developments that completely changed the dynamics of the legal situation when Sophia discovered devastating information about the true financial circumstances behind the house sale. Through a detailed investigation of my father's bank records and financial movements, information she gained legal access to through the court order, we discovered that he had incurred enormous debts in the last 6 months, mainly in online gambling and speculative investments that went very wrong. Isabella, your father didn't sell the house just to finance a romantic honeymoon, Sophia revealed during an urgent meeting at her office, showing me bank documents that proved the true extent of his financial problems. He's bankrupt, with debts totaling more than 200,000 reais, and he used the sale of the family property to cover these debts before creditors discovered his desperate situation. The discovery left me simultaneously furious and nauseated because it meant that my father had lied about absolutely everything. It wasn't just a matter of prioritizing his new girlfriend, but rather a situation of financial desperation where he was willing to sacrifice our family inheritance to save his own skin. This means he committed not only a family betrayal, but also legal fraud by selling an asset to hide debts from legitimate creditors, Sophia explained, her eyes shining with the professional satisfaction of someone who had discovered the key piece to winning the case. With this information, we can not only nullify the sale, but also sue your father for misappropriation and fraud against creditors, crimes that can result in imprisonment beyond civil penalties. The revelation about my father's secret debts and gambling problems forced me to completely reassess the entire situation, because now I understood that the betrayal was even deeper and more systematic than I had initially imagined. It wasn't just a matter of choosing the new girlfriend over his daughter, but rather a destructive pattern of lies, irresponsible betting, and disastrous financial decisions that had been happening for months without me knowing absolutely anything. Sophia, does this mean that even if we recover the house, my father might have other creditors who will try to confiscate the property to cover his debts? I asked, feeling a new layer of concern adding to the already complex situation. Not necessarily, she replied, consulting some civil code articles on her computer. If we can prove that the house was a family asset with a specific inheritance purpose, it is legally protected against seizure for personal debts, especially if you formally assume ownership and responsibility for the property. This possibility gave me a completely new perspective on the situation. Instead of just recovering the house for sentimental reasons, I would actually be saving our family heritage from being dissipated by my father's financial irresponsibility. So I wouldn't just be fighting for Grandma Rosa's memory, but also protecting our family legacy from being destroyed by his gambling and debts, I murmured, feeling how this new dimension of the situation gave me even more motivation and moral legitimacy to continue the legal battle, regardless of how painful it might become in the coming months. It was in this moment of devastating discoveries about my father's true character that I decided to take an even more drastic and confrontational approach, organizing a family meeting where I would publicly reveal all the lies and frauds that had been uncovered during the legal investigation. I called all close relatives, uncles, cousins, in-laws, inviting them to a special dinner at my cousin Amanda's house, claiming that I needed to discuss important issues about the family's assets that had recently emerged. Each phone call was an exercise in emotional self-control because I needed to maintain a neutral and mysterious tone without revealing in advance the shocking details that would be discussed during the meeting. Hi, Uncle Carlos. I'm organizing a family meeting to discuss some discoveries about the sale of Grandma Rosa's house. It would be important to have all family members present, I said during one of the calls, feeling my stomach churn with nervousness and anticipation. For my father, the call was even more difficult and theatrical. Dad, the whole family is getting together on Saturday for dinner at Amanda's house. Can you come and bring Camila? There are some family matters that need to be clarified with everyone present. His enthusiastic response, interpreting my invitation as an attempt at reconciliation, made me feel a toxic mixture of anticipated guilt and vengeful satisfaction. Dr. Carvalho, a criminal law specialist whom Sophia had consulted about the criminal aspects of the case, agreed to attend the meeting disguised as a family friend, ready to explain the legal implications of the discoveries if technical credibility was needed for my accusations. Isabella, are you sure you want to confront your father publicly this way? It will be a very intense and potentially destructive moment for the entire family dynamic, Sophia warned during our last planning meeting. I am absolutely certain, I replied with unwavering determination, because he betrayed me publicly by selling our inheritance behind my back. And now it's time for him to publicly face the consequences of all his lies and frauds. Saturday arrived with a persistent rain that seemed to mirror the emotional storm that was about to explode in my cousin Amanda's cozy house, transforming that familiar space into an improvised courtroom where justice would finally be served. I spent the entire day meticulously organizing all the supporting documents in an elegant folder, bank statements showing hidden debts, proof of online gambling, records of suspicious financial movements, and especially the legal documentation proving how the house sale had been used to defraud creditors. Each paper was a bullet in the gun I was loading to destroy the facade of respectability that my father maintained in front of the extended family, finally revealing who he really was behind the mask of successful engineer and exemplary family man. Amanda helped me prepare an elaborate dinner with everyone's favorite dishes, creating a welcoming and festive atmosphere that would dramatically contrast with the devastating confrontation planned for dessert. Isabella, I have to admit I'm nervous about what's going to happen today, she confessed as we set the table with the special china that had belonged to our common grandmother. But I'm also proud of you for having the courage to confront Uncle Roberto and expose all these horrible lies he's been telling the family. Dr. Carvalho arrived promptly at 7 o'clock, introducing himself as Amanda's colleague and perfectly assuming the role of a casual guest interested in meeting our family. His discreet presence gave me the extra confidence that I would have professional technical support if the situation got out of control or if my father tried to deny the concrete evidence I was about to present publicly. Family members began arriving at 7:30, filling the house with animated conversations and laughter that made me feel a twinge of anticipated guilt for being about to destroy that apparent harmony with such disturbing revelations. My Uncle Carlos arrived with his wife and 2 adult children. My Aunt Marta came accompanied by her husband, and several distant cousins who rarely participated in family gatherings appeared curious about the special reason for the meeting. Finally, at 8 o'clock sharp, my father arrived hand in hand with Camila, both elegantly dressed and displaying broad smiles that showed how they interpreted my invitation as an attempt at acceptance and family reconciliation. Isabella, my dear daughter. What a joy to be here with the whole family gathered again, said Roberto, hugging me with an exaggerated theatricality that made me feel nauseated with disgust. Camila also greeted me effusively, commenting on how excited she was to officially become part of the family after the wedding she was planning with my father. During dinner, which lasted approximately 1 hour, I managed to maintain a facade of normality while discreetly observing each gesture and word from my father, analyzing how he lied with astonishing naturalness when relatives asked about his work and financial situation. Everything is going very well with me, thank God. Work is excellent and I managed to make some investments that worked out very well recently. He lied blatantly, looking directly into my eyes with a confidence that made me realize how skilled he had become at deceiving the people he loved most. With each lie, I felt my determination solidifying even more because I was seeing in real time how he manipulated our entire family with elaborate falsehoods and superficial charm. When dessert time came, my heart was beating so hard that I was sure everyone at the table could hear it. But I managed to stand up calmly and ask for everyone's attention for a special toast I would like to make. The dining room environment became silent and expectant, with all faces turned in my direction in a demonstration of family respect that made the moment even more dramatic and meaningful. I would like to make a very special toast today, I announced with a firm voice, raising my glass of red wine, a toast to truth and family justice, to things that have unfortunately been scarce in our family recently. I could see some confused expressions forming around the table, especially on my father's face, who began to show signs of growing nervousness, probably sensing that something significant was about to happen. I also want to toast to the sacred memory of our dear Grandma Rosa, who always taught us that honesty and family integrity were the most important values we can preserve for future generations. Camila and my father exchanged a quick, anxious look, definitely realizing that my speech was taking an unexpected and potentially problematic direction for them. And especially, I continued, my voice gaining strength and determination. I want to toast to the discovery of truths that were being hidden from all of us, truths about betrayal, lies, fraud, and the criminal sale of our most sacred family inheritance. The silence that followed was deafening, interrupted only by the sound of some glasses being abruptly placed on the table as family members processed the gravity of my words loaded with specific and devastating accusations. Isabella, what exactly are you trying to say with such strong words? Asked my Uncle Carlos, showing the growing concern of someone who was beginning to suspect that something very serious had happened in our family dynamics. Before answering, I took the elegant folder I had prepared and placed it on the table with a theatrical movement that completely captured the attention of everyone present. I am saying that I discovered that our dear Roberto secretly sold Grandma Rosa's house without consulting anyone in the family, to cover secret gambling debts and disastrous investments he had been making for months. I declared, opening the folder and beginning to distribute copies of the compromising bank documents. The impact was immediate and devastating. Exclamations of shock echoed through the room. Chairs creaked as people moved to get a better look at the papers, and a murmur of disbelief spread across the table like ripples in a tranquil pond where a large stone had been thrown. This cannot be true. Roberto, tell us your daughter is lying or exaggerating, exclaimed my Aunt Marta, looking alternately at the documents and at my father's increasingly pale face. Roberto tried to maintain his composure, but I could see the panic growing in his blue eyes as he realized that his facade of respectability was publicly crumbling before the entire extended family. Isabella is completely out of control and distorting a complex financial situation that she doesn't have the capacity to properly understand, he said defensively, but his voice was trembling slightly, betraying the nervousness he was trying to hide. Camila also tried to intervene, but was immediately silenced by hostile looks from family members who were beginning to process the real extent of the betrayal that had been committed against our ancestral lineage. Dad, these are your official bank statements obtained through a court order. I continued relentlessly, pointing to specific numbers in the documents, showing debts of more than 200,000 reais contracted on online gambling sites and speculative investments that went completely wrong. I passed more documents around the table, observing how each revelation caused new waves of shock and indignation among family members who were simultaneously discovering the extent of the lies and fraud. And this here is proof that the 400,000 reais from the house sale were used not for a romantic honeymoon, but to pay loan sharks and creditors who were threatening legal action against him. My oldest cousin, always respectful and diplomatic, finally exploded in indignation. "Roberto, how could you do this to our family?" Grandma Rosa's house was sacred to all of us. Other family members began asking questions simultaneously, creating a cacophony of indignant voices that transformed the previously harmonious environment into a people's court where my father was being judged for his crimes against our lineage. Dr. Carvalho, maintaining his disguise as a casual friend but gradually assuming a more technical tone, began to explain the legal implications of the documented fraud. "From what I'm seeing in these documents, there is clear evidence of misappropriation and fraud against creditors, crimes that can result in criminal prosecution beyond civil penalties." The mention of possible criminal consequences made Camila visibly pale, probably realizing for the first time that she had become romantically involved with a potential criminal instead of the successful man she thought she had won over. The emotional chaos that settled in the room was both intense and cathartic, with family members expressing decades of repressed frustrations about my father's selfish and irresponsible behavior, which had now finally crossed an unforgivable line by betraying our sacred inheritance. My aunt started crying openly, remembering how she had helped care for Grandma Rosa in the last years of her life and how she had trusted that Roberto would preserve her memory through the maintenance of the family home. "I feel betrayed and deceived by you, Roberto. We all trusted that you would do right by Mom's memory," she sobbed, using a handkerchief to wipe away tears of genuine disappointment. My cousins began to recount past situations where they had lent money to Roberto, now realizing they had probably indirectly financed his destructive gambling instead of the safe investments he claimed to be making. Amanda, who had always been diplomatically neutral in family conflicts, finally took a definitive stand. "Uncle Roberto, you not only betrayed Isabella, but you betrayed our entire family by selling a property that symbolically belonged to all of us." The avalanche of criticism and accusations was so intense that Roberto began to show visible signs of desperation, alternating between pathetic attempts to justify his actions and defensive attacks against my character and motivations. "You don't understand the pressure I was under. Creditors were threatening my life, my career, everything I built over decades." He shouted desperately, but his justifications only publicly confirmed the real severity of his hidden financial problems and the extent of the lies he had told to hide his desperate situation. The final and most devastating revelation came when I showed the entire family the text messages that Roberto had sent to Camila during the secret negotiation of the house. Messages that Sofia had obtained through a court order and that clearly demonstrated how both had deliberately planned to deceive our family about their true intentions. And so that no one has any doubts about the premeditation and bad faith involved in this betrayal, I announced, connecting my phone to the room's sound system. "Here are the messages my father sent to Camila during the sale." The electronic voice of the system began to read the messages. "I managed to sell my mother's house without Isabella finding out. Now we can pay off all the debts and still have money left for our dream trip to Europe." The collective shock was even more intense this time because the messages revealed not just the financial betrayal, but also the emotional coldness with which my father referred to the family's sacred property as if it were merely a disposable asset. Other messages were played, each more devastating than the last. "Isabella is too sentimental and would never understand that we need to liquidate unproductive assets to solve our financial problems. It's better not to tell her anything until after everything is finalized." My father's public humiliation was complete when the last message was played. "When we return from our honeymoon, she will have already gotten used to the idea and won't be able to do anything to reverse the situation. Besides, she doesn't have the financial resources to enter into a legal battle against me." Those words revealed not only contempt for my ability to react, but also a cruel underestimation of my determination and the resources I was willing to mobilize to achieve family justice. The final confrontation happened when Roberto, completely cornered by the irrefutable evidence and the social pressure from the entire family gathered, finally exploded in a mixture of desperate confession and pathetic attempt to gain sympathy through emotional manipulation. Fine, I did everything you're accusing me of. But you have no idea of the pressure I was facing, he shouted, rising abruptly from his chair and slamming his hands on the table. After Clara died, I entered a downward spiral that I couldn't control on my own. Gambling was my only way to try to recover the money I had lost in bad investments. His tears seemed genuine, but they came too late to generate any compassion in a family that had been systematically deceived and betrayed for months. And when I met Camila, she gave me hope of rebuilding my life, of having a second chance to be happy. I didn't want to disappoint her by admitting I was broke and desperate. The attempt to use his girlfriend as justification for his frauds only intensified the family members' outrage, who began to vocalize their indignation with increasingly harsh comments about his lack of character and moral integrity. Camila, finally realizing that she had become involved with a financially ruined and morally compromised man, began to physically distance herself from him at the table, showing clear signs that she was drastically reassessing their relationship in light of the devastating revelations. Roberto, I didn't know about the debts and financial problems, she nervously muttered. You told me that selling the house was just a matter of modernizing your investments. The double betrayal was revealing itself. My father had lied not only to his family, but also to the girlfriend who thought she was winning over a successful and financially stable man. The dramatic conclusion of the family meeting happened when Dr. Carvalho finally revealed his true identity and function, transforming that emotional confrontation into an official legal clarification session that definitively sealed my father's legal fate. Ladies and gentlemen, I need to properly introduce myself, he said, pulling a professional card from his pocket. I am Dr. Carvalho, criminal attorney, and I have been following this conversation as Mrs. Isabella's legal representative. The impact of this revelation was immediate, with Roberto instantly realizing he had fallen into an elaborate legal trap where his own public confessions became additional evidence against him. Based on the confessions we just heard, in addition to documentary evidence already collected, I can inform you that Mr. Roberto will be criminally prosecuted for embezzlement, fraud against creditors, and fraudulent sale of family property, the lawyer explained with professional authority, while making detailed notes in a notepad he had discreetly kept throughout the meeting. Camila abruptly stood up from the table, clearly panicking at the possibility of being considered an accomplice to financial crimes. I knew nothing about this. He told me the sale was legitimate and that he had his own resources. Roberto attempted one last desperate manipulative maneuver, appealing directly to me. Isabella, are you really going to destroy your own father because of an old house? Think about what your mother would say if she knew you were criminally prosecuting me. But his attempt at emotional blackmail only strengthened my determination, because it was finally clear that he remained incapable of taking genuine responsibility for his destructive actions, preferring to blame others instead of acknowledging his fundamental errors of character and judgment. Dad, you destroyed yourself when you chose to gamble our family inheritance on a virtual gaming table. I responded with a coldness that surprised even myself. And if my mother were alive, she would be horrified to discover that you sold her mother-in-law's house to pay online gambling debts. I looked around the table, seeing faces of family members who unanimously supported me, before continuing. Tonight, all of you witnessed how Roberto publicly confessed to having committed financial fraud and criminally selling family heritage to hide his personal irresponsibility. Dr. Carvalho seized the moment to explain the next legal steps. Starting Monday, we will formally file criminal and civil actions, seeking not only to nullify the fraudulent sale, but also to ensure that Mr. Roberto faces all legal consequences of his actions. The meeting ended with Roberto and Camilo leaving the house humiliated and isolated, while the rest of the family offered me unconditional support for the legal battle that was just beginning. Isabella, we will all testify in your favor in any necessary proceeding, declared my Uncle Carlos, speaking on behalf of the entire extended family. What Roberto did was unforgivable, and he needs to pay for having betrayed our trust and our family history in such a cowardly and selfish way. I walked to the window and looked at the rain that continued falling outside, feeling a complex mixture of sadness for the family relationship that had been definitively destroyed and satisfaction for the justice that was finally being done in the name of Grandma Rosa's sacred memory. 3 months have passed since that devastating night, 3 months of intense judicial process that culminated in a complete legal victory that brought me not only the recovery of Grandma Rosa's house, but also the deep satisfaction of seeing justice being done before our entire extended family. The judge accepted all the arguments presented, declaring the sale null due to consent defect and fraud against creditors, determining that the property be immediately returned to me with all legal costs paid by my father. The sentence was even more severe than we expected. Roberto was condemned to reimburse all damages caused by the fraudulent sale, including the costs that the original buyers had with documentation, in addition to paying a substantial fine for misappropriation of family property. Camila, who had tried to present herself as an innocent victim of his lies, also faced legal consequences by being charged as a receiver of illegally obtained goods, receiving a sentence of community service and a fine proportional to the benefits she had received. When I left the courthouse that sunny Tuesday morning, carrying in my arms the deed that officially made me the new owner of Grandma Rosa's house, I felt an intense mixture of relief, satisfaction, and melancholy that accompanied me throughout my walk to the car. Sophia was waiting for me in the parking lot with a wide smile of professional victory, but also showing the caring concern of a true friend who knew how much that legal battle had cost me emotionally. Isabella, we did it! The house is officially back to you and your family, where it should have always remained, she said, hugging me tightly while I tried to contain the tears of emotion that threatened to overflow. Your father will have to pay dearly for trying to defraud our family, and I'm sure he will never dare to do something like this again. During the journey back to my house, Sophia explained the next bureaucratic steps I would need to follow to officially take possession of the property, transfer of ownership, regularization of documents, payment of overdue taxes that my father had intentionally allowed to accumulate. But none of this is complicated, Isabella. The hardest part is over, and now it's just a matter of organizing the paperwork, she said reassuringly, noticing my expression of exhaustion after months of constant legal tension. The first day as the new legal owner of Grandma Rosa's house was an intense emotional experience that made me revisit decades of family memories as I slowly walked through the rooms that were now officially mine. Each door I opened revealed vivid memories. The bedroom where Grandma used to tell me fairy tales before bedtime, the kitchen where I learned to make her special chocolate cake, the living room where the whole family gathered for special celebrations. But there were also disturbing signs of the neglect the house had suffered during the period it was officially for sale. Some furniture had been removed by the original buyers who thought they had legitimately acquired the property. There were leaks in the roof that needed urgent repair, and the garden was completely abandoned, with the rose bushes that Grandma had planted decades ago dry and poorly maintained. It will take a lot of work to restore all this, but it's worth every effort to preserve our family history, I murmured to myself, while making a mental list of everything that needed to be repaired and renewed. During the following weeks, I dedicated myself entirely to the house restoration project, transforming that work into a true mission of love and preservation of family memory. I hired a team of masons specialized in old houses to fix the structural problems, an experienced electrician to modernize all the electrical installation without losing the original charm of the decoration, and a gardener who specialized in rose bushes to recover the garden that had been Grandma Rosa's pride. Each day brought exciting new discoveries. I found old letters from Grandma stored in a secret drawer, family photographs I didn't know existed, and even a diary where she recorded her thoughts about children and grandchildren over the years. It was as if the house was telling me its own story, revealing family secrets that had remained hidden for decades. Grandma wrote here that I was her favorite grandchild because I liked to help in the garden. I discovered while reading a page from the diary dated on my 10th birthday, and this discovery made me cry with positive emotion for the first time in many months. The restoration process also became a therapeutic way to process all the pain and betrayal I had experienced during the legal battle against my father. Each wall I painted, each piece of furniture I restored, each bed I replanted in the garden were symbolic acts of renewal that helped me heal the emotional wounds left by the discovery of paternal fraud. Sophia would visit me regularly during weekends, helping with small repairs and mainly offering company during the more reflective moments of the work. "Isabella, you are literally rebuilding your own life while you rebuild this house," she observed one Saturday afternoon, as she helped me organize Grandma's belongings that had been found in the old cabinets. "It's beautiful to see how you've transformed a traumatic experience into an opportunity for personal growth and family preservation." Amanda also became a constant presence during the restoration, bringing her knowledge of decoration and especially her own memories of the house to help maintain the historical authenticity of each renovated space. 3 months after officially taking ownership of the property, I organized a house reopening party inviting all family members who had supported me during the legal battle, as well as dear friends who had accompanied my journey of emotional recovery. The party was planned to coincide with the anniversary of Grandma Rosa's passing, transforming a date that was previously only for mourning into a celebration of family justice and the preservation of our ancestral heritage. I personally prepared all the family's favorite dishes, including traditional recipes I had learned from Grandma and hadn't made for years due to the rush of modern life. The garden was completely recovered, with rose bushes abundantly flowering in an explosion of red and pink colors that created a perfect setting for the celebration. Today is not just a house party, but a celebration of family love's victory over greed and betrayal, I announced during the inaugural toast, raising a glass of wine with all the guests gathered on the porch overlooking the renewed garden. The party lasted until late at night, with family members sharing funny stories about Grandma Rosa, children running through the garden that was now safe and well-maintained again, and music echoing through the house full of life and joy as it hadn't been for many years. During the night, I received several compliments on how beautiful the restoration was, perfectly preserving the original charm while modernizing practical aspects necessary for contemporary habitability. My Uncle Carlos, who had been one of the most outraged voices during the confrontation with Roberto, hugged me emotionally at the end of the party. "Isabella, your grandmother would be proud not only to see the house preserved, but mainly to see the strength and determination you showed to protect our family from those who tried to destroy us." Amanda stayed until the end, helping to clean and organize, and our conversation extended into the early hours of the morning, reviewing all the dramatic moments of the past few months and celebrating how we had emerged stronger and more united from that family ordeal. The following months brought emotional and financial stability that I hadn't experienced for many years, finally allowing me to focus on personal and professional projects that had been neglected during the period of family crisis. I made the decision to permanently move into Grandma Rosa's house, selling my apartment in the city and using the money to pay off all the debts I had incurred during the legal process, as well as creating a substantial financial reserve for future maintenance of the property. The move was an emotionally rich process, where each object I transferred from the apartment to the ancestral house represented a deep reconnection with my family roots and a definitive break with the troubled phase of my life. Sophia helped me throughout the move, and our friendship deepened even more through the shared experience of fighting for justice and personal renewal. "You know you'll always have a sister in me, no matter what happens in the future," she said during one of the last boxes transferred. And those words touched me deeply because they represented the kind of genuine loyalty that I had discovered to be rare and precious during life's most difficult moments. Life in Grandma Rosa's house proved to be even more rewarding than I had imagined, providing me with a daily connection to nature through the garden I now personally tended to, a constant sense of purpose through the active preservation of family history, and especially an inner peace that came from knowing I had fought for what was right and won against all adversities. I established a morning routine of watering the plants while having coffee on the porch, watching the sunrise through the canopies of the old trees that Grandma had planted decades ago, and this simple ritualization of daily life brought me a serenity I hadn't known since childhood. The afternoons were dedicated to projects of continuous improvement of the house, small repairs, reorganization of spaces, cataloging of family historical objects that I continued to discover in old trunks and drawers. During the nights, I read Grandma's diaries by the light of the old lamp in the master bedroom, learning fascinating details about our family history that I had never known and that made me feel deeply connected to past generations of strong and determined women. The relationship with my father remained completely severed, without any attempt at reconciliation from either of the parties involved. Roberto had lost not only the legal battle, but also his credibility before the entire extended family, who now treated him with respectful but distant coldness whenever they met at mandatory family events. I learned through relatives that he and Camila had separated a few months after the end of the process, probably because she finally realized she had gotten involved with a financially irresponsible and morally compromised man. Occasionally, I received indirect news about his situation, that he was living in a modest rented house, that he had changed jobs due to legal problems, that he appeared to have aged significantly during the period of stress. This information caused me a complex mixture of satisfaction at justice being done and residual melancholy for what our family relationship had become, but I felt no impulse to extend a hand for reconciliation. Some betrayals are too great to be forgiven, and some burned bridges should not be rebuilt, I reflected during solitary walks through the house's garden. 1 year after legally recovering the property, I began to develop an ambitious project to transform part of the house into a community cultural center dedicated to preserving local history and family traditions of the region. The idea emerged during a conversation with Sophia about how my experience could be useful for other families facing similar problems of fraud and patrimonial betrayals. I allocated 3 rooms of the house for rotating exhibitions on local history, traditional cooking workshops based on Grandma Rosa'S recipes, and mainly for free legal counseling sessions coordinated by Sophia for people who didn't have financial resources to hire private legal counsel. The project gained enthusiastic support from the local community, with several families offering donations of historical objects, old documents, and mainly their own stories to be preserved and shared with future generations. I'm transforming my personal pain into a positive force for the entire community, I realized during the official inauguration of the Cultural Center. Observing dozens of people circulating through spaces that now serve the purpose much greater than just personal family preservation. The Cultural Center quickly became an important meeting point for the community, hosting monthly events that ranged from local craft fairs to lectures on inheritance, rights, and family asset protection. Sophia began conducting bi-weekly workshops on basic legal issues, teaching ordinary people to recognize signs of family fraud and to protect their assets through proper documentation. Amanda contributed with cooking workshops where she taught traditional recipes she had learned from our grandmothers, creating a generational bridge that connected ancestral knowledge with contemporary practices. During these events, I frequently shared my own story as an example of how it's possible to fight against family injustices and win, inspiring other people who faced similar situations to not passively accept betrayals and patrimonial frauds. If I managed to recover my grandmother's house and bring justice against my own father, you can also protect your rights and family assets, I used to say during the lectures. And these words always generated emotional applause and intense conversations among the participants. 2 years after recovering the house, I received an unexpected proposal from a local publisher to transform my experience into a book about family rights and patrimonial preservation. The idea immediately excited me because it represented an opportunity to reach a much wider audience with information that could prevent other families from going through the same betrayals I had faced. I spent 6 months methodically writing, organizing my personal narrative with technical information about inheritance legislation, legal documentation, and warning signs for family fraud. Sophia contributed specialized chapters on legal aspects, while Amanda added sections about preserving family traditions and strengthening ancestral bonds. The writing process was simultaneously therapeutic and educational, allowing me to fully process all emotions related to my father's betrayal while transforming this painful experience into a useful tool for protecting other families. I never imagined that the worst experience of my life would become the foundation for something so positive and constructive. I reflected during writing sessions in the quiet afternoons at the house. The book was launched in an emotional ceremony held at the Cultural Center itself, with the presence of local authorities, legal professionals, and especially dozens of people who had benefited from the workshops and lectures we regularly organized. During the launch speech, I talked about how my father's betrayal had transformed into an opportunity for personal growth and community service that I would never have imagined possible during the darkest moments of the legal battle. Sometimes life's worst experiences reveal themselves as preparation for greater purposes that we couldn't see at the moment of pain, I told the audience, observing the attentive and moved faces of people who deeply understood the journey I had traveled. Book sales exceeded all expectations, and the royalties were entirely allocated to expanding the Cultural Center and creating a free legal assistance fund for low-income families facing property issues similar to mine. 3 years after everything began with the discovery of my father's betrayal, my life had completely transformed into an existence rich with purpose, community, and inner peace that I didn't know was possible to achieve. Grandma Rosa's house was no longer just a recovered property, but had become a living symbol of family resistance and social justice that inspired hundreds of people monthly. My relationship with my extended family had strengthened immeasurably through the shared experience of fighting against injustice, creating deeper bonds based on genuine values instead of superficial social obligations. Sophia and Amanda had become not just close friends, but true sisters in purpose who shared with me the mission of protecting families against fraud and patrimonial betrayals. During morning walks through the garden that was now recognized as one of the most beautiful in the region, I often stopped before the symbolic grave I had created for Grandma Rosa among the main rose bushes, whispering updates about the projects and thanking her for the strength she had given me to fight for our family heritage. The last time I saw my father was during a distant cousin's wedding, a mandatory family event where we were both present but maintained a respectful distance without any attempt at interaction. I discreetly observed how he seemed to have aged prematurely, as if the weight of the consequences of his fraudulent actions had accelerated his aging process in a visible and irreversible way. His hair had completely grayed, he had acquired a hunched posture that demonstrated inner defeat, and especially his eyes had lost the confident sparkle that had always characterized his personality during my childhood and adolescence. I felt neither anger nor pity observing him, just a distant melancholy for everything our relationship could have been if he had made different choices. During the event, several family members greeted me with genuine affection and made a point of praising the work I was developing at the Cultural Center, creating a sharp contrast between his social isolation and the community integration I had achieved through ethical choices and work dedicated to the common good. That night, after the wedding, I sat on the porch of Grandma Rosa's house watching the stars that shone intensely in the clear rural sky, reflecting on the extraordinary journey my life had taken since that terrible morning when I discovered my father's betrayal in his office. Who would have thought that losing a criminal father would help me find a much larger family in the community? I murmured to the night wind that gently swayed the porch curtains. The garden around me exhaled the sweet perfume of rose bushes that now bloomed year-round thanks to the specialized care they received, creating an atmosphere of peace and beauty that perfectly represented the complete renewal my life had experienced. Sophia had called me earlier to tell me about a new family who had sought legal help after reading my book. Another confirmation that my painful experience was generating positive outcomes in other people's lives. Grandma Rosa would be proud not only to see the house preserved, but especially to know that it has become a center of protection and empowerment for other families. I thought with deep gratitude, gently touching the pearl necklace that had belonged to her and that I now wore daily as a symbol of family continuity and ancestral strength. The future stretched before me, full of exciting possibilities. Plans to expand the cultural center to other cities in the region, the second edition of the book with additional real cases collected through the workshops, and especially the serene certainty that I had found my true purpose in life through transforming a traumatic experience into a mission of family protection and empowerment. Sometimes we need to lose everything we think is important to discover what really has value. I whispered to the rose bushes swaying in the night breeze, their red petals seeming to glow under the soft light of the full moon. And sometimes we need to be betrayed by those we love most to discover how much we are loved by an entire community of people we didn't even know existed. Did you enjoy Isabella's story? Then subscribe to the channel, leave your like and comment where you're watching from. Oh, and there's another story waiting for you here on the screen. Click there and I'll be waiting for you.